to go out there to Shemitah. Every shiur could ask questions and whatever occurs to you. One privilege that those who are here have over those who are in Zoom, you may ask questions during the shiur. Those on Zoom can ask at the end, or you could write it down, but I don't promise that I'll able to see because I don't see the screen throughout the shiur. The thing is, because if you ask questions on Zoom, then not everyone, it doesn't really, we can't always understand it. So, but that's how we'll do it. Okay. So what do we do today? An introduction. So we're getting a conceptual framework. We're mapping out Shemitah. So we're going to discuss first the mitzvot mentioned in the Torah pertaining to the 7th year. Yeah, there is such a concept, the 7th year. The Torah says you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then there's the 7th year. And then regarding the 7th year, there are certain mitzvot pertaining to it. What are the mitzvot? So there are a few. We're going to discuss them. We are going to discuss the reasons that later commentators, mainly medieval commentators, gave these mitzvot. Now, some of them might even be mentioned in the Torah one way or another, but how do we interpret it exactly? Then we're going to discuss the rabbinical halachot that were added on. Not too many, but some rabbinical halachot were added on to it. And then we'll get into the what does it mean? What does all this mean from a practical point of view? And that would be it for today. We won't elaborate. The elaborations would be in the rest of the meetings, as we said. Okay, so what are the mitzvot? So the Shvi'it, the 7th year. Now, sometimes I'll refer to it as Shvi'it, sometimes as Shemitah. Now, it's referring to the same thing. Shvi'it is the 7th year. Shemitah is also referring to that year. There is a mitzvah of shamot, lishmot, to let go. So Chazal mainly called this year Shemitah, the year of letting go. But it mainly, as we'll see, it means the same thing. But now I'm calling it Shvi'it because that's what the Torah calls it, the 7th year. So the main place where the Shemitah is mentioned is in Parashat, the beginning of Parashat Behar, Chumash Vayikra, Perek Kafhei, 25, chapter 25, Pasuk 1 to 7. וידבר השם אל משה בהר סיני לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, כי תבואו אל הארץ אשר אני נותן לכם, ושבת הארץ שבת להשם, 6 שנים תזרע שדיך, ו6 שנים תזמור כרמך, ואספת את תבואתה, ובשנה השביעית שבת שבתון יהיה לארץ, שבת להשם, שדך לא תזרע, וכרמך לא תבצור. Now, notice the word Shabbat that comes up again and again. We'll see soon there might be a link between Shabbat and the 7th year. And it's quite an obvious link, right? Shabbat is the 7th day, this is the 7th year. On Shabbat we rest. Here the land rests. We'll see the connection, and we'll also try and understand the conceptual connection. את צפיח צריכה לא תקצור, ואת ענבי נזירך לא תקצור, שנת שבתון יהיה לארץ, והייתה שבת הארץ לכם לאוכלה, לך ולעבדך ולאמתך ולזריך ולתושבך הגרים עמך, ולבהמתך ולחיה אשר בארצך תהיה כל תבואתה לאכול. This is the longest mention of Shvi'it, and I'm going to just read the English because it's important that we get a flavor of what's going on here. When you come to the land which I give you, then shall the land, I'm getting old, I have to take off the glasses to read. Then shall the land keep a Shabbat to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in its fruit. But in the 7th year shall be a Shabbat of solemn rest for the land, a Shabbat for the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. That which grows of its own accord of your harvest you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your undressed vine, for it shall be a year of rest for the land. And the Shabbat produce of the land shall be food for you, shall be food for you and for your servant and for your maid and for your hired servant and for the stranger that sojourns that sojourns with you, and for your cattle and for the beast in your land shall all its increase be food. Okay, so that's so basically leave your field, don't do anything with it, and not only you eat, but anyone else can eat. You, your servant, the stranger who sojourns in your land, your animals, the beasts of the field. Basically, you leave it open. You don't guard it in any way. Anyone can have it, and anyone is not only humans but also animals. Basically, it's almost like saying it's not yours for this year. You don't touch it. You don't do anything. You don't work it. You don't serve it, and you don't do anything with it. Then the next time we have is in earlier mentions, but less elaborative. We have in Shmot 23:11, והשביעית תשמטנה ונטשתה ואכלו אביוני עמך ויתרם תאכל חיית השדה כן תעשה לכרמך לזיתך. On the seventh year, here, let's read it here. But the seventh year, you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave, the beasts of the field shall eat. In like manner, you shall deal with your vineyard and with your olive grove. Okay, and then again on Shmot 34:21. So here it's already interesting, because here the connection to Shabbat becomes quite obvious. Sheshet yamim ta'avod, uvayom hashvi'i tishbot, becharish uvakatzir tishbot. 6 days you shall work, and on the seventh day you shall rest. In plowing and in harvest you shall rest. Okay, so what's the connection? It's talking about 6 days and the seventh day, obviously Shabbat. And then it says, in plowing and harvest you shall rest. So there is, in the Gemara, there is a machloket, how exactly we understand this. Is it referring to only Shabbat? And the Torah is telling us, listen here, Shabbat is also when there's a lot of work, when there is plowing to do, when there is harvesting to do, you still rest. That's one way of understanding. Rabbi Akiva, who we hold like, says no. It jumps to Shemitah here. So at the beginning of the pasuk spoke about Shabbat, and then it says, and on the seventh year, you rest from plowing and harvesting. Now, what is the connection? How could Rabbi Akiva say something like that? So we won't get into that, but the connection between the two, Shabbat and Shemitah, is quite obvious. We'll discuss it. We'll discuss it later. Anyhow, out of all of these psukim, we find there are eight mitzvot altogether. So there is a prohibition on sowing, right? Your field you shall not sow, that we saw, and you shall not prune. So there is no pruning. You shall not harvest. So harvesting is not allowed. And you shall not pick your grapes. What was the word for that? I don't remember. Sorry. Yeah, no, in Hebrew it's tifso. I mean in English. Yes. I don't know if the undress referred to, yes, something like that. So so those are 4 things not to do. And then it says, V'haya lachem le'ochla. The produce is for you to eat. Lecha v'la'avdecha, for you and your servant, etc., and the animals, but to eat. And from the words to eat, Chazal understand that comes to exclude doing anything else with it. So meaning if I want to sell it to someone, if I want to use it as merchandise, no, you're not allowed to. If I want to just, sometimes we use produce for all kinds of things, right? Let's say you take flour and water and you make, you use it as glue, not as food. No, you're not allowed to do it with the produce of Shemitah. So there is Isur Schora, no no commerce is allowed with the produce of the 7th year. There is what we call Kedushat Shvi'it, the holiness of Shvi'it, meaning these are holy. In what sense are they holy? Holy literally means set aside for an elevated purpose. What are these fruits set aside for? For eating. So I'm not allowed to do anything else with it. And therefore, leftovers, can I throw away? That might be a problem. We'll discuss it when we'll because all we're allowed to do is eat it. Throwing away is disrespecting these holy fruit. Maybe we have to do something else with it. We'll discuss it soon. But now there seems to be a contradiction. The Torah just told us we're not supposed to harvest. Just a minute. So does that mean we're going to starve this year? Because what does it mean, do not harvest? How am I going to eat if I'm not allowed to pick anything, right? Because harvest could mean also just picking something for eating right now. So says the Gemara, but from the fact that the Torah goes on to say, lachem leochla, it is for you to eat, that means to say harvest means commercial harvesting. You're not supposed to do any commercial harvesting, but if it's for your own use, your own immediate use, and then the question is, what is immediate use? So we'll discuss that in a minute. For your own immediate use, it's allowed. What is immediate use? So I'll say now what is immediate use. So there is some understand that what it means is that for what you want to eat right now. If you need it for tomorrow you'll have to go again to the field and pick some more. So that's quite tiring. From the Rambam, the way both Rav Kook and the Chazon Ish explain it, by the way, notice this. From the Rambam, it jumps straight to Rav Kook and the Chazon Ish, no one in between. Can you imagine why?
They were in exile.
Sorry?
Because everyone in between was in exile.
Right. The Rambam was the only one who wrote a work on all the halachot, even though he wasn't, he visited here in Eretz Yisrael once, but...
Sorry to interrupt you, you've only got 7 mitzvot. My mitzvot.
Yeah, no, I didn't, not even 7, because it's all under 5, these 3, but we're still in 5. We're getting there. Because no one kept Shemitah because no one was here. It wasn't a practical question. I mean, there were very few people that were here, but everyone was outside. So it wasn't that much of a, and even the Jews that were here, they didn't own the land. They didn't own the land. They weren't in agriculture. They bought it from non-Jews, and soon we'll see what's the status of that. So it was never a problem until the beginning of Zionism, when Jews began to again cultivate the land and get into agriculture. So and we'll understand that when we're going to discuss the Heter Mechira as well. So what does it mean? So the Rambam, Rav Kook, and the Chazon Ish understand that way as well, say that it means that when you go shopping, you buy a certain amount for your home. So anything that you would bring in for your home use, for personal use, that's okay. Even if it's for a week, for 2 weeks, whatever you usually do, you're allowed to do on Shemitah. What you're not allowed to do is to do more than that, because then it's already commercial. Okay, that was number 5. So not doing commerce, a kedushat shvi'it, and being allowed to harvest for personal use. That all falls under the lachem leochla. Okay, the eating of Shemitah, of perot Shemitah. Number 6 is the obligation to let go of the land. Let go means not only not working the land, that we already said, but also not treating it as yours. There is a machloket whether a person has to actively tell people it's hefker, meaning I don't own it anymore, or maybe he doesn't even have to say that, because the Torah says that. The Torah says you don't own your land, and therefore anyone who wants can now take, even if you don't say it's not yours. Okay, but however we understand it, that is the 6th mitzvah. The 7th mitzvah is not plowing. As we said before, becharish uvakatzir tishbot, according to Rabbi Akiva, so you're not allowed to plow the land on Shemitah as well. And number 8 is mitzvat bi'ur perot shvi. What is that? So at the end of the first part that I read, it is that lachem leochla, it's to you and to your servant, etc., etc., etc. And the beast of the land, of the field, which is in your land, all the produce shall be to eat. So from that, we extrapolate, when the beasts of the field are able to eat, so too we are able to eat. But when whatever produce is not out there for the beasts of the field anymore, meaning it's not in season anymore, we have to let go of what we have at home as well. So let's say I have dates at home, and the season of dates, now dates can stay fresh for a long time, or even if they're not fresh, they're dried and I could keep them for a long time. But out there is no, the season is gone, and beasts of the field cannot find dates to eat anymore. So if I happen to have a basket of dates at home, I have to take it out, put it outside, and say, it's not mine anymore, it's hefker. That's called bi'ur perot shvit. Now, bi'ur, in our connotation, usually it's destroyed, right? That's what we do with chametz. That's what we do with other things. But here it doesn't mean destroying. On the contrary, we're not allowed to destroy perot shvit. They're holy. It means taking out. Leva'er means to get rid of, take out. So you take it out from your home. However, and we'll discuss it when we'll get to it, the halacha is that even after taking it out, you're allowed to say, okay, now it's hefker. So like anyone in the street, I'm now taking it to myself. But only once you said it's hefker and anyone else could have taken it, then you could take it and bring it back home. Okay. Sorry? Oh, okay. Okay. So these are the yes. All of these are just.
Like, let's say your neighbor then takes it to their house, but why are they allowed to have it? They also have to deal with it because it's no longer for the animals. So.
Right. Very good question. So only the person who had it until now, he's the one that he or she are the ones that have to take it out. The person who harvested it or who brought it in when it was still season, whoever took it after it wasn't season already, then can keep it. We'll discuss in further detail when we'll get there. Okay. Now these are the halachot from the Torah, and upon them there are a few rabbinic laws. The rabbi said basically what we understand from the Torah is that attending to the land is not allowed. But there are things that, what about fertilizing? What about all of those things that are not, only the basic things are mentioned in the Torah, but like, what can you think of? Many, sorry? Watering, and many other things that we do in the garden that the Torah doesn't mention. that really from the Torah's perspective, if not for the rabbis, it would be allowed. But the rabbi said that's also not allowed. Okay. Now, there is a difference between those things that are not allowed from the Torah and things that are only rabbinic. Those things that are not allowed from the Torah are not allowed under any circumstances. So, sowing, which includes planting. Planting is not allowed. It's not allowed under any circumstances. You're not allowed to plant on Shemitah. Harvesting is allowed only for personal use, not for commercial use under any circumstances. Pruning is not allowed under any circumstances. Soon we'll see. Not every cutting of branch, though, is pruning. It's pruning only when it's done for the benefit of the tree. Let's say if I have a pathway and the bush is growing into the pathway and I cut it, that's not pruning. Yes, pruning is for the tree, not for something around it. But pruning for the tree under any circumstances is not allowed because it is a Torah prohibition. The non-Torah prohibitions, like watering, for instance, is allowed under what conditions? When the plants actually need it. So anything that would cause a tree or a bush or whatever to deteriorate, if I'm not going to attend to it, if I'm not going to fertilize it, if I'm not going to water it, if it's going to deteriorate in a way, then I'm allowed to do anything to keep it the way it is. But anything that would make it better, which is called le'avoye, that I'm not allowed. The terms are le'ukume or le'avoye. You don't have to remember this. Yes, le'ukume meaning to leave it the way it is. I'm allowed to do something that is to do it better. I'm not allowed to do. So, for instance, I'm now giving examples. We'll discuss it when we'll talk the garden. But let's say cutting the grass. I'm allowed to cut the grass. Cutting the grass is different because it's more like pruning. So that's not a good example. But I'll just mention it since I mentioned cutting the grass. If I cut the grass in order for the grass to look nice, that's allowed because it's not for the benefit of the grass. It's for just to look good. But if I'm cutting grass because I want it to grow better, it's new grass that I want it to spread more. And when you cut it, then it grows better and it spreads more. That's not allowed because that's already pruning. But let's say watering the garden. I'm not allowed to water the garden in order for making my bushes grow, but if they're going to die or dry out or not, if I'm not going to water them, then I'm allowed to water them to make them not deteriorate. And we'll discuss exactly how much we water, how we do it exactly when we discuss the garden. Okay. Now all these halachot, where does it meet us? So okay, in the garden, obviously we said, but also shopping. You're not allowed to do commerce with the produce of Shemitah, of Shvi. So what do we do in Israel? I mean, so many of our produce is from Israel. So what do we do? So that is something that we have to think about. Just a minute. I wanted to discuss the reasons of Shemitah, but the question is, I didn't want to go over 40 minutes, but I won't go over 45 minutes. Okay. The reasons for Shemitah, we actually started a few minutes late, so it would still be 40 minutes. Okay. Before we get to practicalities, I wanted to discuss the reasons of Shemitah. So the Torah says some reasons. So do you remember when I read what reasons were there? Right, for the poor, to attend to the poor. So that is really a reason which the Rambam stresses in Moreh Nevuchim. One of the reasons he says that in order for to look after the poor, that's one reason. question is, does it really look after the poor that much? Because 6 years they have, okay, so every 7th year, the poor people, they have something to eat. And also then the question is, I understand then why I should let my field go and allow others to come in and take. That helps the poor. But in what way does it help the poor that I'm not allowed to plow, that I'm not allowed to sow? On the contrary, the 1 year that the poor people can come and pick, I'm not allowed to plant anything. So they'll get less at the end of the day. In what way is it helping them? So Rav Lichtenstein, my Rebbe, said something very, very interesting. He said, it's not so much to help the poor, but it's to make people recognize the fact that they have to help the poor. Meaning, it's more an educational thing. The fact that every 7 years we let go of our possessions makes us realize that it's not all about having, and it's also important to share. But now, if we are allowed to still attend to the fields while we share, then we see ourselves as the benefactors. We're still walking around like the aristocrats who allow the peasants to come into our fields and take. And the educational purpose is that, no, even more than that. This year, what you refer to as yourselves, as belonging to you, actually, in a way, in a sense, belongs to God. It doesn't belong to you. It's and in fact, if only God wants, then He could not allow you attend to it and tell you there is no such thing as property altogether. So that makes us realize that we are very lucky to have for those 6 years that we have. And this year, it's not even ours to work. And these poor people who are coming in and taking, they're not actually taking from us. They're taking what belongs to God. So 6 years when we take, we're actually also taking what belongs to God. And that makes us realize that idea. So that is one possible purpose. Another one, which is mentioned in Sefer HaChinuch, is that it is similar to Shabbat. What is the purpose of Shabbat? The purpose of Shabbat is to remember that Hashem created the world, right? Hashem created the world in 6 days, and 7th day He rested. And in order to recognize that and remember that, we keep the Shabbat. But it's a statement that there is a beginning to the world. There's a God created the world, and there is a purpose, and that is something that we want to remember. So similar to having a Shabbat, every 7 years we have sort of a super Shabbat. So we have a special day every 6 days, and we have a special year every 6 years. Another reason, which is mentioned in the Ibn Ezra, and also Rav Kook writes it in the introduction to his book Shabbat Haaretz, which is a book on Hilchot Shmita, is that in order for people to have time to attend to spiritual matters, to study Torah, and elevate themselves that way, 6 years we're working very hard, and during the sowing we sow, during the harvest we harvest, and we're always busy, and with commerce and everything. And we could imagine in an agrarian society comes Shemitah, you're not allowed to attend to anything, you're not allowed to deal with anything, then what would everyone do? They go and they study, they attend to spiritual matters. And that is another possible purpose of the Shemitah. In a way, all of these purposes are true for Shabbat as well. Regarding to the second one, I mentioned Shabbat, but also the others. In order to recognize that there are the poor that also need, and we don't own anything. On Shabbat as well, the Torah tells us it's for the servants and the animals to rest as well. There is a social element to Shabbat as well. So that same social element there is to Shabbat and to Shemitah remembering the Bria, that's of course Shabbat, and also having time to attend to spiritual matters, that is also Shabbat. So the connection between Shabbat and Shemitah is quite obvious, and it seems that like we could put all of them under one umbrella of, as Hashem says, as we read, Kili ha'aretz, for the land belongs to me, meaning the recognition that after all, it's not about us, it's about a higher purpose. That is the main thrust of Shvi'it, of Shemitah. And perhaps this is how we are able to understand the concept of Kedushat Shvi'it. The produce of Shvi'it, we're not supposed to throw away. We're only allowed to eat. The most obvious aspect of owning something is that I'm allowed to dispose of it if I only want to. And if someone tells me you're not allowed to dispose of it, then that is a statement, this is not mine. Meaning, even though I'm eating it, if I wanted to throw it away, I'm not allowed to. It's not mine. Yeah, that's a very strong recognition of Kili ha'aretz, the land belongs to Hashem. Another halacha that we are able to understand through this understanding is the concept of Otsal Baiting. We're going to discuss this in our third meeting in further detail. But Otsal Baiting is a vehicle which Chazal invented in order to deal with Shemitah, because soon we're going to get into the practicalities of Shemitah. You can't do commerce. So a person who's living in the out in a village somewhere, maybe doesn't have a problem. He goes out, and if you live in the countryside, then you go into someone's field and you have whatever it is that you need. But if you're living in the city, then the farmers are not allowed to bring their produce to the city to sell to the people. So what is the blacksmith going to eat for the Shnat Shemitah? So Chazal introduced this vehicle called Otsal Baiting. And what is Otsal Baiting? It is Baiting, the courts. They send out workers that harvest and bring the produce to the city, and they charge for their work. The Baiting pays them for the work. The Baiting pays them for the work. The Baiting charges from the people who buy for the work of the people, and that's it. So the farmer does not get anything. No one is charging for the fruit themselves. It's just for the harvesting and for the shinua, for the
shipping or transport.
Yeah, shipping and transporting the fruit into the city. So that's that. But then the question is, but the Torah says, Sadcha lo tiktso. You're not allowed to harvest in a commercial way. What is more commercial than that? It's not for private consumption. So, but if we understand the problem with what is the problem with commercial harvesting is that you own it. You come and you are taking this in order to sell it. But if you are doing it for someone else and they are paying you for your service, then it's under the baiting, it's done for the public good, then there is not that feeling that this is mine. I'm doing it for the people in the city, and that is more of a service, and that's why, and therefore it is okay. Before we get into some practicalities, and with that we'll end, it is important to know that today, however, Shemitah is not deoraita, meaning all of what I said, that the Torah tells us do this, do that, and we're not allowed to do that, today does not apply. What we keep today is only rabbinic. The rabbi said we should still keep Shemitah, although it doesn't apply from the Torah. Now, why doesn't it apply from the Torah? There are different ways of explaining it. It's not agreed why today Shemitah doesn't apply, but it seems that everyone agrees it doesn't apply. So that is important to understand, because it's going to help us soon when we'll get to some of the practicalities. So practically, when we go shopping. How do we deal with it? So I mentioned before Otsal Baiting. Another practical solution is Yevun Nochrim. I also mentioned that before. Produce which is not grown by Jews. Even though it grew in Eretz Yisrael, if a non-Jew has a field, he's allowed to do whatever he wants in Eretz Yisrael. He's not under the jurisdiction of the Torah. The mitzvah of Shvi does not apply to him, and he could sell to us. There is a question whether whatever he sells to us, whether that has Kedushat Shvit or not. Most poskim hold that it doesn't. The Chazon Ish holds that it does. Meaning, even if I bought from a non-Jew produce that was grown by a non-Jew, it might still not be okay. Still might have Kedushat Shvit. Another solution, which is more of a another solution, is produce that was grown by Jews, but in parts of the state of Israel, which Shvi'it does not apply to. Now, how is that possible? There are parts of the state of Israel that Shvi'it does not apply to? Yes, there are. Where? So what is called Aravad Domit, the areas next to Eilat, Shemitah does not apply to there. Why? During the days of King Solomon, it definitely was part of his state. Israel did control those areas those days. But the first temple was destroyed and the people were exiled. And when the people were exiled to Babylon, the holiness of the land ceased. And only when they came back with Ezra the second time to build the second temple, then it became holy again. And there is a concept that Kedusha Rishona Batla, the first consecration of the land, went away with the people of Israel. But when they came back, they consecrated it again. And when doing that, it became holy again. Now, the consecration of Ezra, according to most opinions, remained and continued. Why? It's interesting. So I'll mention the consecration of the people that came in with Yoshua, and even a bit later, was through conquer. The consecration that Ezra and his people did in the second temple was through settlement. And consecration that was done through settlement is stronger than consecration that was done through conquer. Consecration that was done through conquer, when you don't control it anymore, goes away. But that which was done through settlement stays forever. Now, the people that came in with Ezra did not settle the entire land. There were parts that weren't settled at the time. And there are different machlokot, different questions as what exactly are those places. But the Arava, the areas next to Eilat, are for sure not part of that. And therefore, produce that comes from there, you can sell. You don't have to treat as produce of Shemitah. The next thing is Matsaminutak and Gidulei Maim. Matsaminutak, I'm not sure how you say it in English. It's when you grow something not in the ground, but on... hydroponic is Gidulei Maim. Sorry?
Raised beds.
Raised
Beds.
Yes, raised beds. Thank you.
But it's raised beds which are not touching the ground.
Which do not touch the ground, and there is something underneath them, because Kedushat Shvit is only what grows in the ground. If it grows in a pot which is separated from the ground, there is a plate between it and the ground, it's on the table, then it's not, if it is not very big. If it is a pot that is 650 liters or bigger, then it's considered part of the land, even if it doesn't touch the land. Or if it's built into a building, then it's part of the land. But if it's raised from the ground, it's okay. So there are produce that grow like that, and we'll talk when we'll talk about dealing with plants in the home. We'll discuss it also in the third lesson. And the last solution, which we're going to devote a special shiur to, is heter mechira. What is heter mechira? Heter mechira is, I mentioned before that yevul nochlim, produce that comes from non-Jews, is not shvi'it does not apply to. So what they did over 100 years ago, when the agriculture began here in Eretz Yisrael, and it was a real problem how to keep Shemitah. We'll get to it when we'll discuss Shemitah, how great, what it was a very, very serious problem, not only for the consumers, but for the farmers, because what they're going to live from during this year. So it was a big problem. So what did some rabbis, Rav Kook was not the first one, by the way. There were others that were before he even came that came up with this solution, and Rav Kook reiterated this solution, that was to sell the land to a non-Jew. And now it's Yevul Nochlim, it's land that belongs to non-Jews, and therefore it may be sold and everything done for on Shemitah. And there is still a lot of controversy around it. Does it work? Does it not work? Is it even allowed? And we'll discuss it when we'll get to the Shiur. So that's what we saw today. I'll just summarize what we saw today. We saw the 8 mitzvot from the Torah. We discussed their possible reasons. We discussed we mentioned that the fact that today it's all midirabanan. We mentioned the other mitzvot midirabanan. We said that those aspects that are rabbinic, if it is in order to make if we are allowed to be done in order to make the garden not deteriorate, but are not allowed in order to make it better. And we mentioned the possible practical solutions to dealing with Shemitah. So that's what we saw today. And next week we are going to discuss the garden. So thank you very much. Laila Tov. Just a minute. Okay, Phil asked if there are summary guide sheets. No, I didn't do a summary or guidance sheets. I might do for next shiurim, but I can't promise. So pruning, etc., does that apply to trees and pots too? That I'll discuss that in the next shiur, which is not next week, but the week after that. That is when I'm going to discuss that. Yom Tov.
All right.
Laila Tov.
Thank you. Sorry I couldn't make it in person.
Good to see you, even on the screen.
I got a terrible cold. You don't want to be in the room.
Oh, sorry. Have a refuah shleima.
Thank you.
Pleasure.